Have you ever noticed how silence can pull stronger than words? How the absence of noise when it comes from control becomes louder than any speech? There's a strange gravity and stillness that words can never imitate. When you withdraw your energy, you don't fade. You echo. Your quiet lingers like a scent, like smoke that refuses to leave the room. People feel it long after you've gone. That's the paradox of dark Stoic energy. The colder you become, the more they burn from the heat of their own obsession. You stop chasing, stop explaining, stop proving, and suddenly your absence begins to speak for you. It's not weakness, it's command. Silence, when rooted in strength, is not a void. It's a presence. It's the kind of calm that makes noise nervous, the kind of composure that reveals who was actually leading all along. Most men think power comes from persuasion, from making themselves heard, from fighting to be understood. But a Stoic man understands that gravity doesn't make noise. The sun never chases planets. They orbit naturally. That's the art of restraint, to know your worth so deeply that you never need to announce it. When a man stops trying to convince, the world starts to listen. That's when silence becomes dangerous, because it invites imagination. She begins to wonder what you're thinking. She replays moments, tries to interpret your calm. Your stillness becomes a puzzle her ego can't solve. When you were expressive, she could predict you. She felt safe in your openness, certain of her control. But when you went quiet, that certainty vanished. Now she's haunted by what she doesn't know. That's how silence breeds curiosity. And curiosity, if left unanswered, turns into obsession. There's a kind of tension in your detachment that she can't escape. She tells herself it's indifference, that she doesn't care, but her mind betrays her. The absence of your energy disturbs her peace more than your presence ever could. Because silence, when it's deliberate, exposes what words hide. It reveals dependency. It forces reflection. It mirrors truth. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." You don't retaliate, you don't chase validation, you don't fight to be seen. You rise. You ascend beyond the emotional noise that once controlled you. Your calm becomes her chaos. Your distance becomes her mirror. Every second you stay quiet, she feels the weight of your control pressing against the edges of her thoughts. Silence, when practiced by a man who knows his worth, becomes a force. It's not emptiness, it's pressure. It's the air right before a storm. The quiet that makes people uneasy because they can sense power but can't touch it. When you master this energy, you no longer react to life. You make life react to you. You become untouchable, not because you hide, but because you no longer need to explain. The colder your silence becomes, the louder their thoughts will get. And in that contrast, you finally realize, the man who controls his tongue controls everything. Attraction doesn't come from attention. It comes from uncertainty. The human mind is wired to chase what it doesn't fully understand, to fill in blanks that were never meant to be filled. When you stop talking, when you stop explaining, something shifts in the atmosphere. The silence you leave behind becomes a riddle her mind cannot solve, and because she can't define it, she starts to dwell on it. The imagination begins to work overtime, turning what was once comfort into curiosity, and curiosity into obsession. When you were expressive, she felt secure. Every word you said was like a reassurance that she still mattered, that she still had control. She knew how you felt. She could predict your reactions. She could manage your emotions. But then something changed. You went quiet. You stopped trying to be understood. You stopped giving her emotional feedback. The predictability she depended on vanished, and in its place you left space, vast, unexplainable space. That emptiness forced her to think, to question, to imagine. And in the absence of answers, the mind begins to exaggerate. What she used to know became what she hopes, and what she hopes turns into what she fears. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Her thoughts are now dyed with you. Every moment of stillness becomes a reflection of what she's lost control over. She rereads old messages, listens to your last words, tries to decode your silence as if it's a secret language only she should understand. But she can't, because your silence is not a signal. It's a statement. It says, I no longer need to be understood. That lack of communication does something powerful to the human brain. When someone who used to engage suddenly becomes silent, it activates a psychological trigger known as cognitive dissonance. Her mind wants resolution, but your stillness offers none. So she begins to assign meaning to what isn't there. Every second of silence becomes a question. Every quiet moment feels like judgment. Every time she sees you living peacefully without her, it strikes the deepest part of her ego, the part that believed she had emotional control. That's where dark Stoic energy begins to work. You're not ignoring her to punish her. You're mastering yourself to protect your peace. You're breaking the emotional loop that once kept you dependent on validation. Now your silence has gravity. It's no longer passive. It draws her in, not because you're chasing, but because she is. You've turned calm into a magnet. Your detachment becomes the mystery she can't stop thinking about. You've become the unanswered question in her mind. And as the silence stretches on, she realizes something she can't admit. That what she misses isn't your words. It's the control she had when you still spoke. That's the secret of Stoic power. When you stop performing, you stop being predictable. And when you stop being predictable, you become unforgettable. Control only exists as long as you react. The moment you stop feeding someone your attention, the entire dynamic begins to shift. Power in relationships, whether romantic, emotional, or social, depends on who needs who to feel stable. And the man who learns to detach, to hold his energy, becomes the axis around which everything turns. She used to have certainty. She could test your patience, push your buttons, say something cold just to see if you would melt. Every reaction you gave confirmed her influence. Every explanation you offered fed her sense of control. But now, there's nothing to react to. You've become still. And in that stillness, her favorite weapon, certainty, has vanished. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That realization is what separates the Stoic from the emotional. Once you understand that control only exists within, the chaos of others no longer moves you. Your silence stops being a defensive wall and becomes a mirror. It reflects everything back to them. She can't provoke what doesn't respond. She can't manipulate what doesn't react. Your stillness begins to show her the parts of herself she tried to hide. And that's what terrifies her. Not that you've changed, but that she can no longer change you. When you were emotional, you were predictable. She could sense when you were frustrated, when you were hurt, when you were trying to prove your worth. But now, your energy has gone neutral, untouchable. The man who once tried to explain himself now looks like a man who no longer cares to be understood. The one who sought validation now radiates peace. The one who chased clarity now stands in it. And that shift in energy is more powerful than any speech. Because nothing is more unsettling to someone who thrives on reaction than a man who doesn't flinch. This kind of control doesn't mean coldness or cruelty. It means mastery. It means understanding that peace is worth more than proving a point. When she throws words like weapons and you simply don't move, she feels the full weight of her own energy. Your silence becomes a mirror reflecting her instability. What she used to interpret as love, the chasing, the reassurance, the explanations, now reveals itself as dependency. You've stepped out of her emotional frame, and in doing so, you've reclaimed yourself. In that quiet, you become something rare. You become the calm in a world addicted to chaos. You no longer need to win arguments or fix perceptions. You simply exist in control of yourself. And that kind of man unnerves people, because he cannot be swayed. He cannot be guilted. He cannot be rushed. His stillness commands respect because it cannot be manipulated. That's the real dominance, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't chase, doesn't prove. It just is. And that realization, that your composure is your weapon, is the moment true power begins. The longer your silence lasts, the more it begins to reflect what words could never reveal. At first she thinks it's temporary, just space, a pause, a moment for you to cool off. But as time passes, she starts to sense something different in the quiet. It doesn't feel like hesitation anymore. It feels like finality. That's when the silence begins to work on her mind like a mirror. forcing her to face herself without your emotional reactions to distract her. She starts to see what she brought, what she broke, and what she lost, because when you no longer respond, she has nothing left to project onto. All that remains is her own reflection staring back at her. At the beginning, she might convince herself that you're playing games. She tells herself that you're trying to manipulate her, that you're pretending to move on. But deep down, she senses the difference between silence born from strategy and silence born from strength. Yours isn't reactive, it's real. You've made peace with the distance. You're no longer waiting for her to understand. You've stopped explaining, and that stillness begins to feel heavier than anger ever could. Because anger fades, but composure lingers. It settles in the air and makes others question their own noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You become what you give your attention to." And now her attention has nowhere to go except back toward you. Every time she checks her phone, every time she scrolls, every time her mind goes quiet, your image surfaces. The energy you've taken away has left a vacuum she can't fill. She starts to replay moments, looking for signs she missed, rewriting conversations in her head, searching for clues to explain why she no longer feels your energy around her. But what she doesn't realize is that your silence has become her teacher. It's not punishing her, it's exposing her. This is the moment where your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was. You're no longer feeding her the validation that once kept her ego alive. You've stopped dancing in her emotional storms, and now she's forced to face the weather she created. Your calm becomes the contrast that defines her chaos. Without your energy to absorb her drama, she begins to feel the full weight of her own. That's what true silence does. It doesn't destroy, it reveals. You didn't disappear to play games. You withdrew to protect what was sacred, your peace, your dignity, your self-respect. That's the kind of silence that can't be faked. It's not about proving a point. It's about reclaiming your power. You've stopped needing closure because you've given it to yourself. You've learned that not every truth deserves an explanation and not every storm deserves a reaction. Your stillness now speaks louder than anything you could have said. It radiates control, not distance. It whispers one message without sound. I am no longer available to chaos. And that, more than anything, is what she will never forget. There comes a point when silence stops being a tactic and becomes who you are. You're no longer quiet to send a message or to prove a lesson. You're quiet because you've finally learned the value of peace. You've reached the level where words feel unnecessary, where your energy says everything your mouth no longer needs to. This is the moment where control evolves into sovereignty. You're not playing detached. You are detached. Not out of pain, but out of clarity. You've realized that calm is not weakness, it's command. In the beginning, silence felt heavy. It felt like something missing. But as you grew into it, you discovered that silence isn't empty. It's full of power, patience, and perspective. You began to see that every reaction costs energy, and every unnecessary word drains your strength. Now you choose your peace the way others chase attention. You've stopped fighting to be understood because understanding yourself was enough. You no longer chase outcomes. You align with principles. That's what separates the man who's controlled by emotion from the man who governs himself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." You stopped wasting yours. You stopped spending your energy proving your worth to those who could never see it. You stopped letting your emotions be currency for someone else's validation. You learned that peace doesn't mean isolation, it means mastery. And that mastery has turned your silence into a crown. You no longer withdraw to hide. You withdraw to protect your kingdom. She feels that shift. She senses that the silence that once felt cold now feels sacred. The distance that once hurt her ego now humbles it. Because your calm carries a new kind of authority, one that can't be begged for, argued with, or replaced. She begins to realize that she never lost you through conflict. She lost you through growth. You ascended beyond the need for reaction, and that realization is what makes your silence unforgettable. You've become something she can remember but not reach, something she can think about but never touch again. You've become the calm she cannot imitate, the peace she cannot disturb. Because true power isn't found in control over others. It's found in control over yourself. You are no longer part of her emotional world. You are the stillness that reminds her how chaotic hers is. That's the highest form of dominance, the one that doesn't demand respect but earns it effortlessly. Your silence is now identity. It's not armor, it's aura. You don't walk away because you're angry. You walk away because you've outgrown noise. You've turned restraint into rhythm, detachment into direction, solitude into strength. You've learned that the man who masters himself becomes untouchable. And when silence becomes your nature, you no longer need to chase peace, because you've become it. That is the true ascension of the Stoic, when you no longer speak to be heard, but to maintain harmony within yourself.